KOWS 107.3 FM, Occidental, California. The What Now Show, Mondays, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Live on the telephone from the United Kingdom, we have David Deutsch. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Good evening.
What is it, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock where you are?
It's just past 7 o'clock, yes.
All right, excellent. Have you had your supper?
Not yet.
All right, well, maybe we can stimulate your appetite just a little bit more.
Yes, I've just been playing badminton, so I'm having a nice rest now.
Yeah, how's your game?
Bad.
Well, practice.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for joining us. Should I refer to you as Dr. Deutsch or Professor?
David,
absolutely. I'm getting a little bit of an echo. I don't know if you're hearing any, but it's tolerable. It's not bad at all.
Okay. So we could try another line, but...
Yeah, I don't want to take the time to call back. I think we're going to make do here.
Okay.
Are you in Oxford?
Yes.
Okie doke. By way of introduction, David Deutsch, Fellow of the Royal Society, Israeli-British physicist at the University of Oxford. I'm reading from Wikipedia. He is a non-stipendiary visiting professor in the Department of Atomic and Laser Physics at the Center for Quantum Computation at the Clarendon Laboratory of the University of Oxford. He pioneered the field, this is going to take a moment, he pioneered the field of quantum computation by being the first person to formulate a description for a quantum Turing machine, as well as specifying an algorithm designed to run on a quantum computer. He's also a proponent of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. I want to go through this, David. Hang on with me.
Okay.
In the Royal Society of London's announcement of Deutsch becoming a Fellow of the Royal Society a couple of years ago, the Society described Deutsch's contributions thus. Quote, David Deutsch laid the foundations of the quantum theory of computation and has subsequently made or participated in many of the most important advances in the field, including the discovery of the first quantum algorithms, the theory of quantum logic gates, and quantum computational networks, the first quantum error correction scheme, and several fundamental quantum universality results. He has set the agenda for worldwide research efforts in this new interdisciplinary field, made progress in understanding its philosophical implications via a variant of the many universes interpretation, and made it comprehensible to the general public, notably in his book, The Fabric of Reality. And The Fabric of Reality is some maybe 14, 15 years old now, and the new book, which is causing quite a buzz, is called The Beginning of Infinity. So we're very privileged to have you on the show, and welcome and thank you.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
I'm I'm a New Yorker, and I've been reading the New York Times for 55 years. And a couple of months ago, I suppose, let's see. Yeah, in the book review, the New York Times book review gave The Beginning of Infinity, subtitled Explanations That Transform the World, a very rare double-page centerfold in the book review section with the headline Explaining It All. This is quite a feather in your cap to be so celebrated. Yes?
I was very pleased, especially since the reviewer was David Albert, with whom I have some profound disagreements about more or less all the issues in the book. But what we have in common, though, is our sense of what is important rather than what the answer is. And therefore, each of us thinks that the other one is making really good contributions but isn't actually right.
Mm-hmm. What is important, David?
The main issue in the book, from which all the other themes of the book flow, is what is the difference between ideas and ways of thinking that work, that can make progress, that can gain the truth, and those that can't. And this comes up in all sorts of different issues, starting with the fact that progress from the point of view of the human species as a whole, progress is very recent and very rare. for most of human history, people would live their entire life without ever encountering an innovation. Whereas now we take it for granted that iPhone updates come more often than is comfortable.
Mm-hmm. David, I'm going to backtrack and get off the phone and call you back. The echo is a nuisance, and we're going to try again.
Okay, I could give you another number to try.
Well, let me
try this one again and see what happens.
I will. It'll take a couple of minutes. I'll be right back with you.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to try it again. Here's a little more music. David?
Hi.
Hi. We'll see if there are any if we can pull this thing off. As I said a minute ago, I wanted to just take it from the top again. I hardly feel qualified to discuss quantum anything with you, let alone physics or the higher reaches of the kind of brilliance that you're completely that's attributed to you. If you don't mind, there's a couple of things that I want to offer you. First of all, this is an opportunity for you to speak to our listeners. So I'm interested primarily in what you might feel is important for us to know. So I invite you to address us in that manner.
Okay.
There are two ways to do that. One is to speak to us, to meet us more than halfway, and speak to us as the common women and men that we are here. And then maybe later in the interview, I would happily invite you to speak to those of us who may be familiar with the rarefied intelligence that you represent. So would you do us a favor? Would you do me a favor and just make a general statement about the nature of our life here, the nature of the world we live in?
Indeed.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. So I guess the elephant in the room is that progress that we're so used to now, that we're used to reading about new technology and new political ideas and new moral ideas, new ways of life all the time. You pick up the newspaper and you're told that something that was very familiar is soon going to disappear, or you're told something that was very familiar is actually wrong and you never knew this before, and so on. This is what our way of life is about nowadays. Rapid change. And although a lot of people are very cynical about it, if you take the longer-term view of decades at a time, this is definitely for the better. Mm-hmm. So we have to call it not just rapid change, but rapid progress. Yeah. And the elephant in the room is that rapid progress, in that sense, in the history of our species, has been exceptionally rare. And our civilization is the first one ever on the planet to sustain rapid progress for more than 2 or 3 generations. So we've sustained it for 2 or 3 centuries.
Is our progress actually accelerating?
The signs are that it is indeed accelerating. If you look at the sort of rate of change, I'm talking about the rate of change of the way of life of everybody, not just things like the volume of scientific literature and so on, which is going up exponentially, but just in terms of the number of things you can list on the fingers of 1 or 2 hands when you say, I can't imagine what life used to be like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, before we had the World Wide Web or before we had Google and so on. Yes, I think we are now used to a lot of things happening fast along those lines, whereas for most of human history, even, say, a century ago, they also thought that progress was happening fast, but it was nothing compared with the speed now.
Right. And likely we're thinking how fast it is now, and likely we literally cannot imagine what what it's going to be like in another 10 or 20 years.
That's exactly right. So it's going to be unimaginably different from today.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the themes. So I said that was the basic theme of my book. What the difference between what can bring about progress and what cannot bring about progress.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that this tells us is that if there is going to be rapid progress continuing, we cannot predict the future. And that raises some very interesting and important questions about what is the rational way to think about an unknowable future. How can we plan for an unknowable future, and so on. And some of the common sense ideas about what to do in that situation are just wrong, in my opinion. For example, assume that our best technology of today is still going to be there 50 years from now. It's still going to be the best 50 years from now, which is sort of assumed in a lot of planning, is just silly.
Right. It's preposterous.
Indeed. But then the interesting question is, what can we do? Since we don't know the content of future technology, future ideas, even future conceptions of right and wrong, things that we think are things that we thought were fine 50 years ago are considered horrible crimes today. Things like beating children or racial discrimination and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to accelerate too. So what can we do? I think the main thing to realize is that the same thing that causes this horizon of predictability is the very thing that is our only possible defense against it, and that is rapid progress.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to encounter problems that we cannot predict, and the only way to deal with that prospect is to make as much progress as we can as in understanding the world in a fundamental way, because if you have fundamental theories, then there is a chance that they will be able to cope with unfamiliar situations. If you merely have parochial rules of thumb that work for the moment and in a certain situation, then you're going to be in real trouble when the unexpected arises.
Right.
And we're already doing that. So it's not. I'm not calling for a radical change in the whole of society. I think our society is already like this. It's more that people find it scary when it is actually the reverse.
Well, it's an absolutely unprecedented opportunity.
It is, and we don't. You see, we change things for the better whenever we can see it's for the better. So the unforeseen problems are going to be of the form something or other looked as though it was going to be good, but raised an unforeseen problem. Right. And that's not too bad. A lot of times in the past, people intentionally caused horrible things to happen. That's not what we're doing in our civilization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the title of the book, The Beginning of Infinity, is actually an optimistic, or optimism maybe isn't the right word. It's actually an intuition that we may well be on the verge of quite possibly a golden age.
Yes. I think it's more than an intuition. I think that this follows from the best knowledge we have about how knowledge works, what the relationship is between theoretical knowledge on the one hand and technology on the other, the ability to change the world. Yeah. And that I do call that optimism, even though it's slightly different from the conventional meaning of the word, something like expecting the best outcome. I don't necessarily expect the best outcome. It's just that the best outcome is possible. That is, that there are no fundamental barriers to progress.
Right.
That's optimism in my sense. In other words, to achieve things that we want to achieve is just a matter of knowing how, provided we don't want to violate the laws of physics by going faster than light or something. making a perpetual motion machine, provided we don't want to do that kind of thing, we can do anything if we have the right knowledge. And we already know, fortunately, how knowledge is created, basically, through the methods of science and reason.
Right. And we also need the right heart, don't we?
Yes, well, another of the themes of the book that comes out from this is precisely that moral ideas and also aesthetic ideas. I have a whole chapter on why flowers are beautiful, objectively beautiful, and also moral ideas are objective. There must be objectively such a thing as right and wrong. There is no automatic way of knowing what it is, any more than there's an automatic way of knowing whether the Higgs boson exists. What we have to do in the case of the Higgs boson of scientific controversies is conjecture testable theories and then do experiments to distinguish between them. With moral theories, we can't do tests. You can't test experimentally whether a given goal that you have is morally right or morally wrong. But what you can do, and what is perfectly analogous, is you can apply rational criticism. You can see whether that theory meets the criteria that it is intended to meet, whether it's consistent with other things, whether it's consistent with facts, which we can test, and so on. And in that way, this is how the moral progress that we've made already has happened. So there is such a thing objectively as right and wrong, objectively beautiful and ugly, just as much as objectively true and false in science and mathematics.
Yeah, you've written in that chapter that deep truth is often beautiful, and that mathematicians and theoretical scientists call this form of beauty elegance, which you say is the beauty in explanations.
Yes, explanations are the theme that links knowledge in different fields. So that what you just said is an example of aesthetic knowledge being linked in a way that we don't yet understand, but which is perfectly obvious when you're participating in it, that there's a link between aesthetic knowledge about beauty and mathematical knowledge, which is about abstractions, and also knowledge in science, which is about the laws of physics. So explanations are the link. Explanations are statements of what is there in reality and why and how it works.
Are we coming to understand who we are? Are we starting to get some clarity about human identity?
The short answer is yes, but this is something that one of the least understood things. We know who we are, what we are as animals. That is, we know quite a lot about our evolution, and we also know quite a lot about how evolution in general takes place. But how our minds work, which is the distinctive thing about humans that makes us qualitatively different from every other currently existing animal on Earth, is our minds. And we don't know how those work. And there are lots of ideas which claim to know, the field of artificial intelligence for the last 50 years has believed that it was on the verge of creating an artificial one of these things, an artificial mind, and it hasn't yet. And in my opinion, that is because there is a very important, outstanding problem about how creativity works. And again, as I say in the book, I have learned to apply a single criterion to all claims by people who claim that they understand the human mind. Namely, can you program it? Can you make an artificial one by programming what you think is the explanation of how it works into a computer? And no one at the moment can, and therefore I don't take any such claims seriously at the moment. It's definitely the case that such computer programs can be written, but we just don't know how to do it yet.
Do you have some sense of what we're living for, other than just participating in the unknown phenomenon of being here and developing and evolving?
Yes, again, this has to do with both moral and aesthetic values. What we're trying to do, even though many people try to deny this, they deny that they are trying to do what is right, or trying to create what is actually beautiful, and so on. But that is what we're trying to do, and that is the meaning. Religions traditionally thought that the meaning was already known or had been revealed to humans, and that what our task is to live up to that, to enact it. My view is the other way around, that the meaning of life is something that we are using creativity to discover, to build. There isn't a perfectly accurate word for what we're doing, but that we can't find the meaning of life in the world out there, nor just by pure thought or by reference to an authority. What we have to do is form explanations about what is right and wrong, what is better and worse, what's beautiful and ugly, and hone those theories while also trying to meet them. At any one moment, we will meet them imperfectly, just like scientific theories at any one moment are only an imperfect explanation of what the physical world is like. But through criticism and conjecture, and seeking the truth, we can eliminate the errors in what we had previously thought, and thereby make progress. And that is, trying to find the meaning of life, trying to create the meaning of life, is the meaning of life.
Mm-hmm. So we want to model and articulate reality.
Yes. Both moral, aesthetic, as well as abstract and physical reality. Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Is the idea of a single universe quaint? Is it already anachronistic?
In my opinion, yes. But I have to give a warning with this, to go along with this theory, that the overwhelming majority of my colleagues among fundamental physicists who work on fundamental physics would disagree with me. The clinging to a single universe worldview and trying to explain away both the theory and the experiments of quantum mechanics is the majority view. Now, I think this is deplorable, but I don't want to go around giving the impression that my view is the only one about this. Quite the contrary. I think perhaps fewer than 10% of my colleagues would agree with this. But I think this is just a sociological phenomenon. Something went badly wrong with the physics community round about the 1930s, and we haven't yet got over it. And it's a bit of a scandal, I have to say. It is exactly as if paleontology, the denial that quantum mechanics describes parallel universes, is exactly the same logic as denying that fossils represent dinosaurs, that fossils are evidence of dinosaurs. So what people say is, okay, the quantum mechanics experiments come out as if the photon in our universe was being affected by photons in other universes, and so on. But that doesn't mean that there are other universes, because no one's ever seen one. And that's the same logic as saying, okay, so the dinosaurs are the only known explanation of fossils as we see them, but no one's ever seen a dinosaur and no one ever will, and therefore it's optional whether you say those dinosaurs are real or not. And so just as people say that quantum mechanics is only the study of what we will see when we do an experiment is exactly the same as saying paleontology is only the study of fossils, not the study of what animals brought about those particular patterns in rocks. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that the state of mind of physicists when they try to avoid the many universes conclusions is the same as that of creationists, but I am saying, I'm afraid, that the logic of their argument is identical to that of creationists who say that there are fossils but no dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are you satisfied with the precision of language?
No, but that's only because new ideas, if they're fundamental, they often make existing language misleading and imprecise. So this certainly happens in parallel universe theory and in some of the other fields that I've worked in. But I think the idea of having a perfectly precise language in order perhaps to get rid of all human disputes and so on, I think that's a chimera. There's no way to do that. What we have to do is be as precise as is necessary to express the explanations that we want to express. Mm-hmm. The perfect precision is impossible. And also, terminology, language, always contains also built-in assumptions, some of which will be wrong. And therefore, language contains built-in false theories. One of the ones that I described in my first book was language contains this false theory that time flows, that the present moment moves from yesterday to today to tomorrow. But of course nothing moves from yesterday to today to tomorrow. Yesterday always remains where it always was, behind today. And so this idea of the flow of time, which is built into our very language, is just a mistake. And it's one of the things that one has to unlearn when one deals with time in physics. And that's a general thing, that language contains assumptions and theories which may be false.
Mm-hmm. Do you find existence fascinating, and more than that, do you find it worthy of ecstasy?
Yes. Now here we come immediately to a place where language is perhaps not precise enough. I think that because of this unity of these many different kinds of truth that I mentioned, physics, morality, aesthetics, and so on, the pursuit of joy, I would say, rather than ecstasy, is it's really the only, on the largest scale, it's really the only token that we have that we're doing the right thing. And yet, I've immediately got to contradict what that sounds like. It sounds like a hedonistic, advocacy of a hedonistic worldview. You have to remember that again, if we try to fit this into the general scheme of being at the beginning of infinity, of expecting unlimited improvement in the future, that means that we have to be critical of the criteria that we use to be joyful about something. So while using it as a criterion, as a guide, we must not use it as an authority. So it's not that we subordinate everything to joy or pleasure or so on, but that we use it as a guide while being open to changing it. So we should be ready to change what we enjoy to something better. This is, by the way, what's one of the things that's wrong with utilitarianism, the idea that that morality consists of maximizing one's preferences or maximizing the greatest good of the greatest number. It assumes that our preferences are fixed or biological or so on, and in fact that that denies the most important thing about human beings, namely that we alter our preferences. We can improve them just as we can improve all our other ideas. Preferences are just ideas. So the stereotype refutation of utilitarianism is that your friend asks you which of these two job offers should I take? Which of these two jobs should I want? Is really the question. And you say, well, choose the one that you prefer. And he says, yes, well, don't be silly. That's what I'm asking you. I'm asking you which one I should prefer. And utilitarianism cannot describe the meaning of that exchange, but I think it's perfectly obvious what it means. It is possible to be undecided about what to prefer. And this is something that only humans, again, can do, because animals do have fixed preferences. Yeah. They can be trained to do one thing or another, but if one animal can be trained to do it, then so can another. And there are things that, for each animal, there are things that it is impossible to train it to do, which seem perfectly obvious and natural to a human to do.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious why you chose to turn away from the word ecstasy.
Because ecstasy to me has a connotation of a renunciation of criticism. One falls into an ecstasy. One is dominated by ecstasy, and it is something supposed to be primal and beneath the level of critical thought, whereas the thing that I'm aiming for is entirely subject to critical thought.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have regard for the work of Thomas Berry and Brian Swim?
I don't know them, I'm afraid.
I see. Well, they, among other things, they produced a book called The Universe Story about 20 years ago. Uh-huh. And it had, it's kind of like the family album. It kind of gives us a beautifully articulated sketch of the history of our universe, this particular universe. I just thought you might be familiar with it. David, these days we're witnessing a tremendous social phenomenon around so-called spiritual ideas and practices. Does the word spirit have any real meaning?
Rather than ask about the word, I would prefer to concentrate on the phenomenon. I think this progress that I referred to at the beginning, which was caused by the pursuit of truth and good explanations and so on, has been accompanied from the outset by various forms of rebellion against it. So that some of them are very overt, and I think the spiritual trend that you're referring to, if I understand correctly, what you're referring to is one of the sort of rebellion against reason. It is saying that there is something more to the world than true and false. Mm-hmm. That perhaps if we feel that something is true, that can make it true. Perhaps if we want something to be true, right, that can make it true.
Or hope it to be true.
Or hope that it's true. Of course, there is a grain of truth in that, as I said earlier, only the laws of physics stand between us and knowledge stand between us and achieving what we want. But that's not what we mean here. The spiritual angle that I was criticizing is that we can make things be true just by believing them to be true, or hoping or wishing, as you said. Mm-hmm. Now, that rebellion, I think, is wholly false. It's a sort of hangover from pre-rational times, but it also has an entirely modern aspect, which is that it is a rebellion the ancient spiritualism and religiousness and so on was not a rebellion against reason. The reason, as we know it, hadn't really been invented. But the modern one is. And just for completeness, let me say that I think a more dangerous enemy to reason is not this overt rejection of it in spiritualism, but the apparent acceptance or even worship of it. The best way I can describe this is that the French Revolution described itself as the triumph of reason, and the result was mass slaughter, and including the killing of the most prominent scientists in France, and the imposition of bloodthirsty dictatorship, followed by Napoleon and war and so on. And all this was done by people who believed that they were overthrowing ancient unreason in favor of reason, but actually, and they called this the Enlightenment. And to me, this is just another rebellion. This is the Enlightenment rebellion against reason. But the Enlightenment also had another strand, which was followed more in the English-speaking countries, which was in favor not of establishing immediately a state called reason, which would be the ideal state and which would then not need any further improvement, but on the contrary, to try to improve things so that institutions were able to correct their own errors. So this was a very gradualist and evolutionary approach to unlimited progress. One of the paradoxes of the bad kind of application of reason is that even if you were to succeed in doing that, it would mean that you had, and achieving your utopia, it would mean that no further progress was possible. And if no further progress is possible, then what we were saying earlier is the essence of humanity would no longer be possible either. Humans would just be functionaries in this idealized utopia, and there'd be no point in being one. And but in practice, it just led to violence. Whereas the good side of the Enlightenment is the thing that is now the basis of Western civilization, and has the potential for unlimited further progress in the future if we make the right choices. If we make the wrong choices, we could just destroy it and go back to stasis or worse, just as happened with every previous attempt at progress in human history.
Do you sense any obligation that we have to succeed?
I suppose we do. If you recognize that you have an obligation to future generations, then really I don't see any alternative but to say that we need progress, because progress is simply helping future on that time scale, is helping future generations not to suffer, not to be thwarted in their attempts to improve their lives, helping them to be better in whatever ways they turn out to want to be better, which we hope will be better ways than we currently think are better, so everything can improve. The only alternative, which is sometimes called sustainability, is to assume that everything that works today, we should never do anything today that isn't going to work indefinitely. And that means, if we take that seriously, that means that we're aiming for stasis. I know that people who are in favor of sustainability don't think of it that way. They think of sustainability as sustainable progress. But that is a contradiction, in fact. If you analyze that in the light of what progress actually consists of and what is required to make progress, unfortunately, it is impossible, because progress requires conjecture and criticism, and therefore it requires errors. And conversely, if we try to achieve an error-free state, we will also have a progress-free state. As my old boss, John Wheeler, used to say, our whole problem is to make the mistakes as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he was speaking about within physics, trying to improve our knowledge of the laws of physics. But the same thing is true of all knowledge. Our whole problem is to make the mistakes as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. And conversely, arranging things so that we don't make any mistakes, so that we can't make any mistakes, or that we're trying to make a way of life that doesn't have mistakes, is also necessarily a way of life that can't make progress.
You were at one time, maybe you still are, involved in a project called Taking Children Seriously. Is that still something that's alive?
Yes, it's. This is just another application of the same idea, that in the broader sense, a lot of ideas that are prevalent today are hangovers of a time of stasis, the time of a static society that preceded what we call Western civilization. There was a gradual change beginning round about the time of the Renaissance, and those ideas were all about trying to keep existing knowledge the same, because they thought that all things worth knowing had already been said, perhaps in holy books and whatever, and the whole of society was just a gigantic machine for keeping the existing ideas, morality, knowledge, technology, ways of life, and, of course, religion, the same, preventing change. And if you think about how we think about education today, it's one of the things that hasn't really caught up with the Enlightenment. When we think of for example, what makes a good school, a good university, a good educational system, it's high standards. Well, high standards means everybody, as many people as possible, should meet the standard. In other words, they should be as alike as possible. And what's more, they should be alike by the way that was defined by the previous generation. And really, that is the exact opposite of what we need to make progress. And as a result, the values that are embodied in the educational system, like do as you're told, and become standardized, and so on, are actually in conflict with the values of our society in the broader sense. Mm-hmm. So constantly issues arise about a conflict between one of the things that people take for granted should be normal in a school or in a family between parent and children, on the one hand, and things like freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of thought, and so on the other hand. And we need to, I was just going to say, emancipate children from compulsory education. But emancipate is the wrong word because it has a connotation of politics. Just having freedom for children is not the same thing as it is in for freeing slaves or making women equal and so on, because what really counts with children is not so much what they're allowed to do or not do as how their thinking is supposed to go, what one expects a good life to be for a young person. And at the moment, the idea is that youth is a time during which one becomes assimilated to the standards that by which one is going to be judged when one is older. And a freer concept, which is closer to the values of the Enlightenment, is to say that youth, childhood, is a time of creativity, and creativity is unpredictable, and that the real thing we need to try to do is to make the whole of life like that, rather than to shoehorn children and young people into an existing pattern.
All of us, yes. Amen to that. We have to wrap it up in a minute, sir. I have one question, and it's this: is at least for now, is the universe or the multiverse anything other than blazing intelligence itself?
We can make it so. Well, I don't know about anything other, but it is implied by the idea that progress is, that there are no bounds on progress, that if we play our cards right, if we want to, we can become the major thing that is happening in the universe, both in the physical sense, that is by leaving the planet on the spaceships and going to other planets and then to other star systems and eventually other galaxies and spreading across the universe and making all the matter and energy there increasingly do what we want it to, what gives us joy, what we think is right for it. And when I say we, I don't just mean humans, and if there are any extraterrestrials out there, then we and they will be doing this together. So there's only one kind of person possible in the universe. So, but not only in that physical sense, but also in the moral sense, in the aesthetic sense, that we will be the thing that is deciding what should happen next and what is beautiful. So, yes, I don't think it's quite right to say that mind will be everything, but mind can, if we play our cards right, if it plays its cards right, can dominate everything, can be the most significant thing about the universe.
And we have every reason to trust it.
It's not really a matter of trust, because trust again suggests that there is something immutable about the values that will come up. So trusting them would mean that we're not going to change them. But we are, in fact, going to change our values. We are doing it very fast already, and we will be doing it faster.
I'm very grateful that you came and spoke to us today, and many, many thank yous.
Well, very interesting questions. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hope to speak to you again. All the best.
Okay, bye-bye then.
David Deutsch in Oxford, Great Britain. The author of The Beginning of Infinity, Explanations That Transform the World. Also author of a